the things that I've often said to people is men and women, we're just different. That studies will show that we're hardwired differently. That when a man is doing a project and a woman is doing a project, that if they were to study the brain, that in fact the woman is using far more of her brain, and the man uses very little of his brain when he functions. And yet the problem with this is I don't think we believe it. I don't think we believe that we're really hardwired differently. And so part of the challenge then comes when I interact with someone of the opposite sex, I forget that this isn't a man or this isn't a woman. And then I begin to assume that they should just know how we should function. And this took place, I found, in a very concrete example every day at the Newman Center. Every morning we'd get up as a group and we'd pray morning prayer, and then we'd sit around and have coffee. And while we were sitting around having coffee, inevitably a guy would finish his cup of coffee. He would simply get up from the table, walk over to the pot, fill up his cup, come right back down and sit down. Day in, day out. And one day I was sitting there and I noticed a couple of the girls kind of giving this look like, what's that all about? And finally one of them said, wait a minute, what about me? And I just simply said, well, he's a man, what'd you expect? And she's like, he's a jerk. And I said, no, he's a man. And it was like this light bulb came on and I thought, she doesn't know. She doesn't know what it's like to be a man. And so she's assuming he's a woman. And so I stopped and said, all right, ladies, let me explain. This is how it works. If this was 10 men sitting around a table and Joe finished his cup of coffee, Joe would stand up, walk over to the pot, fill up his cup. All the while thinking, everyone knows what I'm doing. Everyone can see me, they know where I'm going, and they know what I'm getting. If they want a cup, they'll ask. If they don't, they won't. Case solved. Well, maybe Bob does want a cup, and Bob will say, Joe, get me a cup. And then Bob will say, what do I look like, your mom? No, my mom's cuter than you. Something like that. But he'll go get him a cup, pour him the coffee, hand it to him. That the way in which men act is, if I have a need, I'll express it. If I don't, I won't. But now, that works for men. Women, on the other hand, I've come to notice, if they were sitting around having cups of coffee, they'd be noticing everyone's cup. And somebody would sense that someone's cup was getting low, and they'd simply say, Sally, would you like some more coffee? And Sally would say, sure, I'd love another cup. And then they'd get up and go get it and fill the cup up. Because in women, there's a sense of being able to fulfill a need of another. That women are just inherently aware of their surroundings and those needs. And so when you're with women or with men, it's perfectly fine. But you bring them together, and a woman is sitting there looking at her cup thinking, can't he see my cup is empty? And he should ask if I need another cup. And he's thinking, she must not want a cup because she hasn't said anything. That what I began to realize was we needed two things, training and understanding. So what I would begin to do is I'd train the men. And I'd simply wait for one of the guys to do just that. He'd get up, get his cup, sit down. Then I'd simply say, let me explain, you're not with men, you're with women. And so things work differently with women. And I'd simply explain to them, what you should do is you should look around and you should offer. Yes, I know, I realize you're thinking, why? But there's no explanation. There's women, that's why. And so all you have to do is simply say, would anybody like a cup? I'm more than willing to get one. And then you do it. And they may want one, they may not want one. And then with the ladies, I'd simply say, now ladies, go easy on the guys. Because they're not thinking that you need a cup because you haven't said anything. And so sometimes you need to be willing to say, would somebody be willing to get me a cup of coffee? Or while somebody's up getting it, to be willing to ask. And when you're willing to ask, then he's able to fulfill that desire or that need. And to see that the woman sitting there expecting her needs to be met and known is simply acting like a woman. That's how women function. And for the men to not ask is being a man. And so that understanding comes in. That when I walk into a room and I survey the room, that if I see that this is mixed company, then I sort of shift my thought process. And I begin to function and look at it a little differently. And I begin to say, okay, well, I need to be more aware of the needs of those around me. I need to be more aware of what they may want, and I need to be willing to ask them if I can get them something. And if it's the ladies, they need to also know that they simply just have to ask. That yes, it would be nice if every man could know every desire of every woman and fulfill it. But it's just not possible. And so we begin to understand this. And this is what the church speaks about as men and women being complementary, that they complement each other, that they're different, and when we bring the differences together and when we understand those differences, we begin to work in harmony. And that sometimes I think is one of the great challenges in any relationship, is we have a man who only thinks like a man and is unwilling to be able to think like a woman, and a woman who just expects men to think like women. And yet what I learned was, over time, with a little bit of training and a lot of understanding, that coffee at the Newman Center was beautiful. That I saw many opportunities of men willing to ask and women being willing to ask as well. That we still would have that first guy having coffee for the first time who would inevitably get up, get himself a cup, and sit back down. The ladies would then wait and watch as Father Paul would step in to simply teach and explain the differences between men and women. And so the next time you're sitting around and your man doesn't fulfill a need, don't yell at him, but realize he's a man and I should be grateful.